Today, we engage in a dialogue about our contributions to mental health organizations, advocacy efforts, leadership roles, and the ways we are challenging and redefining the field for future generations. This is not just a conversation about challenges. It's about power, progress, and the legacy that we're building. We're honored to have with us a distinguished group of panelists who have each made a significant mark in the mental health profession. Through leadership, advocacy, clinical practice, research, and mentorship, they have paved the way for meaningful change. So for starters, I'd like to introduce Dr. Zoya McCants, who has had particular experience and expertise in maternal mental health and prenatal post-traumatic stress disorder. Licensed in New York, New Jersey, and in Pennsylvania, she maintains an active role in professional leadership as the president-elect for NARASIS and past president of the American Counseling Association New York chapter. Dr. Morris Diaz is a licensed mental health counselor who holds a doctoral degree in counseling psychology and counselor supervision, as well as dual master's degree in psychology and in counseling. Dr. Morris Diaz's research has focused on African-American women, help-seeking behaviors, well-being of minority women, and multicultural influences in counseling. She is the most recent past president of the New Jersey Counseling Association, where during her presidency, she's worked closely with the division and legislators to have New Jersey become the 32nd state to enter into the Interstate Counseling Compact. And Dr. David Ford, who is a tenured associate professor and department chair in the Department of Professional Counseling at Monmouth University. He is the past president of the New Jersey Counseling Association, past co-chair of the Branch Development Committee, a member of the Black Male Experience Task Force, past board trustee for counselor education and research for the National Career Development Association. He is the North Atlantic Region representative to the ACA Governing Council and serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Counselor Education and Supervision and the Journal of Multicultural Counseling and Development. Thank you. So to begin our discussion, I pose to our wonderful and esteemed panelists, can you share your personal journey into the behavioral health field and what inspired you to pursue a leadership role in this profession?
Well, I'm to be a part of this esteemed panel. Today, Julius for Junior pronounce him and his, and my identities I'm holding at the moment are queer, Black, Southern, and Baptist. I say that because a lot of my experiences in this racist, homomistic, transmistic country we have, I wanted a way to just bust up into that piece and just screw up white supremacy, heteronormativity, and patriarchy. And the only way to do that is to find ways to support other Black men like me. All of my curricular experiences have been at PWIs, and I've gone to some pretty great universities, and believe that we need the support in higher education, especially those that are attending great universities. And I want to be the support. So initially, I was in student affairs. I was working in Res Life at Winston-Salem State University, and I wanted to move to student affairs, eventually be a VP of student affairs. And I went to get my master's in counseling, which totally just reoriented my thinking about my career trajectory and mental health, and then going through my own struggles with mental health and my identity as a queer Black man, and how I'm going to see a counselor, a Black woman at a white university who was my counselor and helping me through that process really just solidified my desire to be a mental health professional. So that's what brought me into being a counselor, and having professors that were leaders in ACA really just helped to solidify my desire to be a part of leadership in that respect. Not only in my master's program, but my doctoral program. I did my undergrad and grad at Wake Forest University, then my PhD in counseling at Old Dominion University. And all of my professors were leaders in the profession. And I took a lot of cues from them to really just become someone who wants to be a leader in ACA in its divisions.
Mhm.
And so now I'm finishing up my term on governing council, um, and I want to move up in leadership, whether it
Mhm.
be NCDA or ACSSW, which is our new division for sexuality and wellness, or maybe even one day be an ACA president if they want someone like me to be ACA president.
Mhm.
Because now I'm prone to cuss, and we'll cuss in a minute. And so,
Mhm.
but I want to be that leader that people can see that, hey, people like me can get involved and do have a home place in ACA that has been very white
Mhm.
and very anti-black, anti-queer, anti-trans,
Mhm.
and anti everything but white.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm hoping that my that I can be that person and be
Mhm.
that leader that we need in such a time as this.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. I saw Dr. Morrissey, as I saw that you had unmuted. The same question is posed to you. What can you please share your personal journey into this space?
Uh, Absolutely. I had a little bit of a different journey. I went off to college, and in my mind, I was from a very young age. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to med school, and that was my only goal. So I finished at Rutgers University with the hopes of returning for med school. And in that year after I graduated, I did a post-bac. I took some courses in science that I needed to finish up. And that year I decided that I did not want to go to med school. Um, and instead, I wanted to be a helping professional. I had got a job in the field and I absolutely loved it. And so that kind of led me in the direction of psych, which was my minor. Um, and then ultimately getting a master's in counseling in order to get licensed. And in that time, I didn't have a lot of leaders that looked like me. I know what I wanted to do. I know that I wanted to, become something and do something in the field. But what that looked like for me, I was not seeing. And I remember having a professor very distinctively and saying to that professor, hey, how do I be like you?
Mhm.
How do I become like you? And ultimately, I did it. And I'm glad that I did because I was not seeing a lot of Black women, Black males in our field. And once I finished my second master's, I had my son, and I was like, I got to keep going. And my family really pushed, like, hey, you wanted to get your doctorate, didn't you? So that's kind of what led me back to school yet again and finishing. I'm done now, I promise. But I work with the severely mentally ill population, and I see the help that's lacking for them. I see a lot of us not getting the help that we need for whatever reason, and just being able to be a face, a familiar face, or someone that someone else can relate to, I think is very important in this field, whether it be for our clients, whether it be for the interns that I'm serving. Just to have someone that looks like them that can tell them, hey, this is how I do it, because I know I did not have that.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. And to Dr. Ford's sentiments, snaps to that. And Dr. McCants, I'm going to pose the same question to you. If you could share your personal journey into this profession.
Okay, so hello everyone, good afternoon. I think my story sounds a lot like Dr. Morcia. I wanted to be a pediatrician. You are not telling me I was probably Doc McStuffin before she became a thing. Um, I had a little bag. I was going to be a doctor. I was going to help the kids, and that's it was it. But when I got to college, all those science classes. I was like, oh, wait, no, this is not my love. This isn't my passion. This isn't what I really want to do. I still pushed myself anyway, but I decided that I was going to add in criminal justice as my minor in undergrad. And I was like, okay, well, let me figure this out. So I'm going to do behavioral science. That was my major. I'm going to do these criminal justice courses. And I had professors, my Black professors happened to be in the law department. So a lot of them were trying to push me into becoming a lawyer. Oh, you should go to law school. It's you. It's who you are. You love to argue. Oh, you love to have a point and make it stand out. But I still was like, I don't think that law is it for me. So I stayed the course in behavioral science, and I decided at the end of the program where I met with my advisor, and she actually said, "Hey, we have this program in counseling, and I think it'd be a nice like mesh about what you're doing, and it'll work for you." And it was an older white woman who sat with me and literally was like, "You have these qualities, you have these grades. I need you to keep going and don't stop." So I decided to go into the mental health the counseling program. Now I started the program super young. I was 22. And so by the time I graduated from my counseling program, I was 24. Who was I counseling at 24, right? So I had to get a job out there and work in case management, housing case management. And then in New York, we call it assertive and community the treatment teams. In New Jersey, it's called a PAC team, I believe. And I did this work, so working in the community. And I had some supervisors who were brown, and I was like, okay, I see them, but I didn't have that space where I could get into academia. It was like, okay, we're in nonprofit world, and the way it felt was either you're in nonprofit world and you're doing this mental health work, or you're in academia. You can't do both, and you can't ride this wave. You've got to pick one, and then when you get in one, you're pigeonholed in that one, and you're stuck there. So there was no, oh, go be an adjunct to somewhere else. I had to figure it out. And I think a lot of my time was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because in my head, I was just going to get my license in counseling. I was going to have a private practice. And that was I was going to be the therapist, right? I was going to work with the people and help brown women who I knew who needed some help, who were going through anxiety and depression. And then that just kind of unfolded into more and more. So my first role in leadership, I was 25, and I was hot off the press, and it was a person who looked at me and said, I think that you can run this team, and I need you to do it. I had no training. It was just take what you know and what you have been doing and go. Mm-hmm. So there was no mentorship. It was just, let's get going. You are now the team leader of this ACT team. You have to run it. 80% of the staff was older than me. I had to figure out those relationships and how to navigate that. So I think that really not having access to mentors can put you in a bind, and you're trying to figure out like, what do I do next? And when you are trying to look at other people and see what their career trajectory was like and what it looks like for them, and do I want to stay in nonprofit worlds where I'm doing the work and I'm in the trenches, I'm doing the work, or do I want to go into academia? All of that came about by meeting more people, talking to people, really trying to expose myself into spaces where you have to network, and not necessarily having to network before, but pushing myself to network and pushing past that fear and anxiety to ask those questions and to be in those spaces. So I think all of that kind of led me to where I am today, but it definitely took some time to figure out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to make an impact in leadership.
And thank you all for sharing your own personal journeys. And there's some interwoven common themes that I'm hearing when you think about representation, when you talk about the importance and the value of mentorship. And I'm actually really curious to really speak to representation and mentorship and the role you believe that it plays in shaping not only behavioral health policies, but more importantly, our own leadership in its process of behavioral health. So I'm curious if any one of you could take the lead on mentorship and representation and its role in pursuing leadership in our profession.
To pay homage to some very strong Black women in ACA who saw this young, impressionable Black man who was new in the profession and took me under their wing. They're my aunties, my play mamas, people that have steered me in the right direction, that have given me advice, given me the hard advice, been very real and straight with me, that have opened opportunities for me, and I wouldn't be here without them. People like Dr. Carla Atkinson Johnson, um, Dr. Sarisi West Alatunji, Dr. Marquita Evans, um, first non-white president of ACA, the Thelma Daly. People like that who have always been like a guide for me. Um, Cheryl Holcomb McCoy, Dr. Norma Devines, people like that. But then there are some Black men, some of them my fraternity brothers, members of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, um, who have been like big brothers and mentors for me, like Dr. Michael Hannon, Dr. Michael Brooks, um, people like Dr. Kent Butler, who was ACA president, um, who have been those guides for me in this profession. And there was one who passed on, who's resting with the ancestors, um, Dr. Don Locke, who was a father to a lot of Black men in counseling and counselor ed, who was who was he was a strong, silent type, but when he spoke with authority, and now has a mentoring award in our profession named after him because he was a mentor for a lot of people. But having people like that I can look up to in the profession, Black people that were very open to being mentors, that really just took me under their wing, and I appreciate their spaces and making spaces for those of us.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. And I couldn't help but notice that all of the mentors that you listed are contributors to the mental health space. When you think about published literature, evidence-based practices, textbooks that we use in our courses, these are profound influencers, change agents, impactors in the behavioral health space. And I so appreciate the fact that you've extended just your ability to know them in real life in terms of their impact on your career. Thank you. Dr. McCants, Dr. Morris-Diaz, in terms of representation and mentorship, how has that impacted and influenced your navigation in this space?
I would say that the lack thereof made me desire to go harder and stronger so that when I am that for other people, that I show up in those spaces and I have the information to share with people, that I create the spaces where I bring people together. So, like when my students are asking questions and they need help with how do I navigate like an internship site? How do I get information? Where's the research? What are events that I could attend that I feel like I'm knowledgeable and that I'm able to bring them into those spaces? So, like, and Dr. Ford, you don't even know this, Dr. Ford. I went to an ACA, my first ACA conference. I didn't know anybody, but Dr. Ford was like, hey, girl, hey, come here. And I was like, okay. Had no idea who was in that room, but I just figured I'm here. I'm going to start talking to people, push yourself a little further. So as I have, come up through working in nonprofit sector and working with influential folks who have been in those spaces, who may not necessarily have their hands in that research area, they've had that on the ground experience. And how do I run a team? How do I go from being the supervisor who ran one team to now I've been promoted to run these 8 teams? And now I have to sit here, but also realizing that as a young Black woman, how do you get to go from running one team to running 8 teams? Right? Like, how do you know how to manage that? You don't. You have to figure it out. But a lot of times we're not often given that education or that training to develop our leadership skills to do so. So a lot of that, it came from having to meet with people and say, hey, can I put some time on your calendar to talk about how you manage all of this? Because just speaking from experience, being a person who worked at Westchester Medical Center in Valhalla, in New York, Like I went from running an ACT team to running the ACT team, the emergency department, the substance use clinic, the HIV care clinic, and then the adult outpatient care, the child outpatient care. And I was like, where do you start? How do you do this? And no one is there to kind of walk you through. But if you fail, you're left to fail. Right. And we know that feeling. And then you overwork yourself, you put yourself out there, you go a little bit harder, you stay a little bit later, and then you're the one who's overwhelmed with all the feelings and trying to make sure that you do everything accordingly because you've got this really big title and no one's there to really help you process what do I do with this. So how do I get to those spaces and then help like those who are coming up to say, hey, ask these questions, to work with these people and get the knowledge and realizing that that's actually a setup for failure, right? To get promoted and not know what you're doing and have to figure it out on your own.
It sounds like the lack of access to mentorship propelled you to be the mentor of what you've envisioned of wanting and having for yourself.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Morris-Diaz, I think you wanted to share insights on that as well.
Absolutely. And Dr. McCants, again, like it's very similar experiences that I've had as well. And just not having anyone in leadership or knowing how to reach out or knowing how to move forward and having to figure it out. And like you said, having that burden of feeling like, okay, as a Black woman, I have to be good, but I also have to be better, and I have to make sure, this aligns and everything's perfect because, like you said, Dr. McCants, if you fail, then it's like, but the tools aren't there to begin with. And I think me and Dr. Penthi recently had that conversation of not having the resources and the tools to set us up for success. And how do we pass that on to the next generation? And I'm always available to other students. I take on interns at the drop of a hat because fortunately enough, while I didn't have representation that looked like me, I did have someone who took me under their wing, who showed me, different ways to navigate within private practice, within the field while I was coming up and gaining my licensure and things like that. And I'm always a huge advocate to be able to pay it forward to someone else. So I'm always available and always open to give that knowledge because I know that I did not have that. And I had to figure it out. And I hope that the next generation wouldn't have to just figure it out. And I can give something in that way. And so, with that being said, being a mentor myself as much as I possibly can is important. Both Dr. McCants and Dr. Ford, I've had the pleasure of being able to work with in the past, thanks to you, Dr. Penthi, as well. And I think things like this is what has allowed me to see, all right, there's other people that look like me and they are doing it. And so I need to get there, right? And so things like this and bringing us together, I think is really important for us. And while in my doctorate, I think it was just me and Dr. Penthi. We had each other to lean on while we were finishing up our doctorate, and we were figuring it out together. And we're so grateful to you guys as well. For allowing us to be in different spaces and showing us the way as well. So.
And I think, Dr. Morris-Diaz, you bring up a really excellent point when you speak on advocating. And I'm curious for us in the room, how have you found yourself navigating challenges and complexities regarding advocating when you think about equity and access to care, especially when we're looking at marginalized communities or those who have not had the most access to quality mental health services? Go ahead, Dr. Morris-Diaz, you got it.
So for me, advocating looks like one of the things that you had mentioned while in my presidency at NJCA, being able to show up at the State House, being able to speak to senators and be in a room full of people and, and talking to these senators. And I was the only Black girl on the stage and kind of advocating for our field and advances in our field to get us a part of New Jersey to become part of the counseling compact, which I think is really important because it allows us to counsel across state lines and reach other communities that may not have access to care. And I think it's really important. I think about my own clients in that sense, that have gone off to college or doing different things and having the challenge of finding a counselor, one, or therapist, and then moving and having to lose that. I think it's a challenge in itself to be able to be comfortable and work with a therapist, especially when you're talking about the Black and Brown community, and to get to a place where you're able to do that and then lose that because you go off to college or you move out of state. I think is a little bit silly. So for me, it was really important to have New Jersey become part of the counseling compact so that we don't lose those connections. I think it's important as well, in the work that I do at in my partial cares and things like that, and showing people that, you know, there are people out there that care. There are people out there advocating for you that also look like you, and letting them know that it's okay to seek help. It's okay to, you know, need help and be looking for people that look like you. I remember I had a client that wanted an African American female, but was too afraid to ask that. Oh, do I ask that? Should I say that? Is that appropriate? Absolutely appropriate. And just educating our clients to know, like, it's okay to speak up and ask for what it is that you're looking for. We're out there, we're here. And putting ourselves out there is definitely important when we talk about advocating and being able to show up and show our clients that, you know, there are people in the field championing for you.
Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing from you, Dr. Morris, is empowering clients to be consumers of their therapeutic their process and really advocating for themselves of the representation that they want in the room with them, right? Where everyone's best friends in their heads and being able to see themselves and representation of themselves in the room. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So for me, advocacy looks like, so I'm an academic first. I still see clients, and you know, both sides of the house, the student affairs side and the academic affairs side. One thing that we really have to be intentional about is recruitment and retention of Black people in counseling programs.
Mm-hmm.
And my I'm hurt that the NBCC Minority Fellowship Program is in jeopardy because of the Corporal Stiltskin and his band of Republicans. And I'm going to say that because I have some animosity for that because I'm a product of the NBCC Minority Fellowship Program. But we still have to do our due diligence to get more Black people into counseling programs and to help them to get through counseling programs so that therefore we'll have more Black professionals out there. And then for those that want to go on to get a doctoral degree, we need more Black people teaching students in our counseling programs, more Black people providing clinical supervision. Therefore, it's going to snowball. More Black people in the profession, more Black people can produce more Black people in the profession. And so my job is to hold our feet to the fire.
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing to go into historically Black colleges and universities to recruit?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are we doing to make sure that HBCUs that have counseling programs can sustain them?
Mm-hmm.
We don't to assist them in getting and maintaining CACRB accreditation.
Yeah.
What are we doing to support students that are Black that want to go into master's and doctoral programs? How are we supporting them through the research process? Are we taking their research ideas and watering down to make them whitewashed? You know, wow, what are we doing to decolonize our syllabi, teaching methods, and the way we actually go through the whole doctoral process? We're making it more culturally inclusive. Are we letting people know that, hey, our admissions processes are racist as hell? We're challenging our school's racist policies. yeah, there's an attack on affirmative action. Yes, there's an attack on DEI and this whole anti-CRT nonsense because people don't know what CRT really is.
Mhm.
We can arm ourselves and say that, hey, this is not just about quotas for Black people. This is how we sustain the profession because the profession has always been white. That's my soapbox for today.
No, and I appreciate that perspective, Dr. Ford, especially from the lens of academia, right? When you're thinking about our overarching professional organizations make a very intentional effort of diversifying applicant pools, right? Because we're servicing the communities in which we are products of. However, do we do a better job in retaining the diverse talent that we're looking to recruit? Right? And are we providing supportive measures when you're thinking about mentorship opportunities, when you're thinking about support on one's research initiatives and agenda? Are you thinking about informal networking opportunities outside of the classroom, right? If we're talking about being really intentional with diverse faculty, creative research agendas and platforms, opportunities to speak at workshops, conferences, and the like. And how are we in the state of academia? And again, we're all educators in this room. How are we making a very intentional effort to not only just recruit, but more importantly, retain within this space? And the missed caveat, what I am finding and across various landscapes is the retention component. We're having a really difficult bit on that. So kind of segueing into, because again, we've done a phenomenal job kind of speaking to the landscape of behavioral health. But I'm curious from your own professional experience, what has been the most rewarding moment in your career and that continues to fuel how you tend to transform the behavioral health space?
I'll
I know
preface
that's
this by
such a
saying,
heavy question. What the most rewarding part of your career? It's a heavy question.
preface this by saying that in my life that I want to be the chair of any department. Did not, and it was thrust upon me
Mhm.
because of a part of my French shitty situation.
Mhm.
And I tell folks, if they come to you with department chair and do it, but if you have to do it, try to make as much change as you can while you're in the role because you don't have any power as department chair, especially when you're supervising tenured folks. You can't fire them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but for me, the thing that I want to go down in history as during my 5-year term as chair is getting more people like me into my program. And this, like my first year as chair, we had 2 students to come from HBCUs. Um, sure, I just hired 2 women of color before that. Could have hired 3 had we had the money in the budget. Um, so for me, the thing that I want to go down in my legacy as is making my program more colorful, if you will, if you will.
Mm.
And I want to continue doing that. We have a position open right now, and I hope to God we can get a person of color in there.
Mhm.
If not, I did my due diligence because I'm not on the search committee. I'm the department chair. But you know, I want to continue to try to kind of tip the scale a little bit and get more. Um, One of my friends, Dr. Kevin James, he's the president of Morris Brown, and he has able to get that school in service. They're accredited now and everything. And I'm trying to open up a memorandum of understanding to create a partnership to get more students from Morris Brown. And I'm
Mhm.
trying to do more living
Mhm.
in my relationships with HBCU presidents that don't have counseling programs to say, hey, let's get this partnership. Y'all don't have a counseling program. We do. Come bring your students to Monmouth. I guarantee you we'll take care of them. They'll be in
Mhm.
good hands.
Mhm.
And So that I want that to be my legacy.
Thank you, Dr. Ford. Dr. McCants, what would you say would be the most rewarding piece of your career?
That's a hard question because there's more than one thing. And to sum that up, I think one of the things that stands out to me the most is that I always say, especially when I'm giving a presentation on maternal mental health, I say maternal mental health is a niche area until it is no longer a niche area. When your client becomes pregnant or has to make a decision about her body and her choices and her next steps in her life, it is now on the table and you need to understand it. So I'm always going to advocate for women's health, but I will never not advocate, obviously, for Black women and the mortality rates that we see when it comes to maternal health. Like that will always be a part of that conversation. I have to bring it up. I'm going to talk about it all the time. And for those of you that do know, like currently right now, I'm working with a publisher to release a textbook on perinatal and mental health, where we now have a Black person with a Black voice talking about maternal mental health. Because when we look up those textbooks, we're not on those textbooks, right? So it's important that we now have that space and to kind of know, like, oh, you're the writer of the textbook. You're the person who's writing about this and bringing that expertise in and bringing in other people and other voices to talk about the importance of perinatal and mental health. That to me is very rewarding and it keeps me going. But at the same token, every year I go to graduation and I see my students walk across that stage, my heart goes pity pat because I'm just like, you are doing it. You're doing what you said you wanted to do or what you thought you couldn't do. But when you cried and said, I didn't pass my test, I didn't pass my comp exam, we're going to do it again. We're going to practice one more time and we're going to pass that test. Or when my supervisees are say to me, oh, I'm at my hours. Can you submit my form? And they call back with this excitement, like, oh my gosh, I'm a counselor now. I'm licensed, I'm official. And I take them out to lunch and we go celebrate. Those are the points where I pause and I'm like, the work, pay it forward.
Paying it forward. Dr. Morris Diaz, what about you?
Absolutely. I think there's many points in my career as I continue to progress. I continue to say every year I'm working on the next big thing. I'm working on, continue to build myself. I think I do see little moments where I'm like, wow, okay, I'm really doing this. But I think the biggest point in my career thus far, and I'm gonna move away from, academia and my clients. I think the biggest thing was having my son watch me walk across that stage when I graduated. And him being so little and young and telling me, Mommy, I'm so proud of you. And allowing him to see that you can do anything that you put your mind to. And so I'm a huge advocate for him, of course. And I think anything that I do, I have him in mind because I want to show him that as a Black man, there'll be challenges, but you can do whatever it is that you want to do. And for me, that's been a highlight, being able to show that to my son and have my son look up to me and see, hey, mommy's doing it. Daddy's doing it too, but mommy's important. So for me, that is important. So I always have him in mind whenever I do something. And all of those other accolades, they'll definitely come because I'm a hard worker and, I want to push forward. So every year like I said, I'm looking for what's next. So this year we'll see what's next.
So just out of curiosity, when thinking about all of the advocacy work that you've done respectfully and all of the professional roles that you've played within the industry, what advice or recommendations or tips and tricks would you share to any young professional who may be now interested in pursuing not only a career in behavioral health, but more importantly, the leadership positions as it relates to policy making and changes, whether it's in the academic affairs or if it's in the space of our professional organizations?
Don't stop. Don't stop. That's it. Don't stop. Keep going. Anytime I talk to a supervisee and they're like, oh, you have this, you have that. Hey, keep going. You can do it. Anytime I hear a young student, oh, I gotta work, I gotta go to school. Well, guess what? I worked full time, I worked part time, I went to school full time, and I had a kid. So you
Mhm.
preaching to the choir. Like, don't stop. Just keep going.
It's called the
Thank
Holy
you.
Ghost. Hallelujah, thank you, God. Mm, mm. It's on my bow tie. Yes, God. Mm. But see, for me, to, you just blessed me when you said that. Just on a serious note, you really blessed me when you said that. Because there are so many times when we're told that we can't. We have to keep on moving forward. I will say this to a lot of people: don't do this by yourself. Sometimes we think that because of we the black superwoman and the black superman, and that's why I don't like concepts like resilience and grit, because they're based in white supremacy and racism, and we're expected to excel no matter what life throws at us, and do it by ourselves, because that's when you've accomplished something. But no, it's for help. Always ask for help, seek out mentoring. You might find some I'm saying assholes out there that don't want to mentor people.
Mhm.
That's not for you. But for everyone that doesn't want to, there'll be five that are willing to do it.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
That mentor and use them. And not everyone deserves access to your authentic self. You're gonna apply for these jobs, and they're gonna say, well, they might not say it now these days with anti-DES stuff, but they might say, we want to hire diversely, or we want a diverse person with this. Diversity is such a loaded term anyway. But they may hire you, but then when you start showing them who you really are, they may not want you.
Mhm.
That's not the place for you. Now, always have an exit strategy, because not every place deserves access to your authentic self. Be authentic. Be who you are.
Mhm.
Don't let people change you. Don't let the academia change you. Don't let these degrees change you. These licenses change you. But know that there are going to be some spaces that don't really want you. Find that space that does. If not, create that space that does.
Mhm.
Don't give up, like Dr. Morris Diaz said. Keep going. Be authentic self. Don't change. And know what spaces are for you, and find that mentoring that's going to help you to excel.
Mhm. Thank you, Dr. Ford. And Dr. McCants, any suggestions or advice for any young professional getting ready to hop, skip, and jump into leadership roles within our spaces and places?
Show up in every room and shake it up. You bring your voice. Say what you need to say, even when that voice starts to crack and shake, and you're like, ooh, pity pat, my heart is racing. I feel like nervous to say this. Say it. It needs to be said. The reason you feel nervous to say it is because it needs to be said and no one else is saying it. It's the same way when I walk into a space and people are talking about maternal mental health, maternal. And I'm like, yes, but Black women are dying.
Mhm.
Can we talk about that part of the conversation too? So let's talk about how we can advocate, and we can talk about all women. Yes, this is an issue, but we also see where it's a rising issue in one particular community. And we really need to talk about this a little bit more. And when I very first had to talk about Black maternal health, my voice was shaking because it wasn't even my lived experience, but the fact that I knew of clients and people who had traumatic birthing experiences that were just really hard. And it's like that one experience in their life will now shape if they ever decide to have any children again. If they will ever decide that they want to say, oh, I'll have a second child. And most of them say no because that experience has been so challenging and so hard for them. So, whatever you need to do, if you're in a leadership role, if you're put into a leadership role, like you seek out that mentorship, like Dr. Ford said, you show up in the rooms. Every room you're invited to, and not invited to, I think I should be part of that meeting. I need to show up in that room. I need to hear what's going on. I need to know what's going on, and I need to speak. Shake it up, speak it up. If you feel like I'm concerned, well, you're concerned for a reason, and you're concerned because there's no psychological safety there, right? Like you don't feel like they value your input, but what you need to say is important. Your voice matters, and don't ever shun your light and your voice because you feel like the other people in the room are not going to listen. Make them listen. Say
Thank you. So the takeaways that I've gotten for anyone in this space and who are in attendance of if you are thinking and considering pursuing leadership roles is definitely don't stop. Showing up your authentic self and seeking out mentorship and shaking up the table in the room, because any and everything that we have to say, we are owners and experts of that we need to contribute and say. So I do see a question in the chat, and I'm curious to have it to the panel of how does someone that is an ally support early career minority professionals who want to grow into industry leaders?
Got answered, but I want to say public. First of all, instead of saying minority, say minoritized. Yeah, because minoritized takes into account the way the system places us in a position of lower of loose power.
Mm-hmm.
So to support minoritized identities and as an ally, first of all, ally is the foundation. But a lot of times allies tend to retreat when things get tough. And I'll say, don't be that white ally that supports us after the meeting and comes and says, I agree with everything you said. Be that white accomplice or conspirator that supports us in the meeting when we speak up. Especially like if you're in an academic setting and your minoritized identity person is pre-tenured and they have a voice, be that tenured faculty member or that administrator that says, you know what, I agree with everything that they said and then some. And support them in that, because a lot of times we feel alone and then we're afraid to speak up because people can retaliate against us with tenure promotion. So we need those voices that really want to advocate for and with us and on our behalf to speak up when we do speak up. Or when I come to you say, you know what, that was just, be that voice that says, you know what, hold up, I got this. Because white privilege is real and academia is very white. And sometimes people have to levy their privilege to support those that are minoritized.
So recognizing that the foundation is just to become the ally, but doing more than just showing up in those spaces. Okay. And then we have another question of how can we support young Black and Brown professionals dealing with imposter syndrome, particularly those who feel unqualified due to a lack of mentors or difficulty finding them. And I'm actually going to pitch this off to Dr. McCants, because you had highlighted earlier on the lack of mentorship from your own personal experience.
I'm sorry, I'm just rereading it. So
No
dealing
worries.
with imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
Imposter syndrome is socially constructed, right? So we kind of walk into this space and we think that we're not enough. But why do you think you're not enough, right? Where does that come from? It didn't come, like you went to school, you had the education, right? You've done your internship, you've done some work in this space. Where those thoughts really come from, it's what's happening in society, how we are walking into the space and we're thinking that people aren't valuing us automatically. So the feeling of imposter syndrome becomes us when it really is them in the space, right? You are making me feel this way. I'm feeling like I have to overdo everything. I have to show up even bigger and better and bolder to just do the basics, right? And then you start to compare yourself to the other people, and you're like, well, I'm doing all of these things, but I'm not making that same salary, or I did all of these things and I didn't get that promotion. So realizing where the imposter syndrome is actually stemming from. Where is it starting from? Is it really because you don't feel confident about what you're doing, or is it the space that you're walking into and what they are perpetuating and why you feel that way? So if there is no support there, then like Dr. Ford said, then maybe you have to think about that exit strategy. It doesn't mean you leave today, right? You may not have the perfect plan yet, and that's okay. You got to pay bills. I get it. And groceries are high. So you got to take your time. You got to strategize. Okay, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? But make sure that I know I cannot stay here. So I'm still actively working on a plan. But that imposter syndrome, think about what's the core of it? Where is it coming from? Is it coming genuinely from me because I'm feeling like I lack a sense of confidence? Or is it coming from the place where I work that perpetuates this feeling that I'm not good enough or that I need to do more? Or, and I'm sorry to say this, y'all, I don't like that hashtag Black Girl Magic. I am not magic. I am not a unicorn. I am a human, and I can work and I can do my job and I can do it well, but I'm not magical. I work hard at what I do. So don't say it's magic, because then you take away the hard work about what I do. That's not magic. That's me getting up every single day, showing up and doing everything that I'm supposed to do and going above and beyond. Not magical. My worth, my work ethic, and I deserve to be valued for it. So don't give me some glitter with a hashtag Black Girl Magic. I don't want that. Okay,
We got
so
claps in the chat for that, Dr. McCants. And I think we have another question, and this is from a graduate counseling student at St. John's who graduates in the upcoming fall. And their question is, how or when did you find your niche or specialty or your calling within your profession? And when you did, what steps did you take to grow and expand your niche?
oh, should I go?
You can go.
So as I said, honestly, my I've always been into women's health. I never thought it would be the way I am today. I just always thought like, okay, I started my private practice. I have to say like 85% of my practice still today are women and women of color. Um, it has been a growing area for me. And I just thought that, because I specialize in trauma, complex trauma, and that's been my world for so long. I was like, okay, this is what I do. But when, like right before the pandemic, so like in 2019 was when I started to see more of my clients with the journey for perinatal mental health. And that's when I pushed a little bit more to do some more research, to read a little bit more in the area, take some more certifications, really unpack like what I wanted to do and say, okay, I know what I do with anxiety and depression and trauma and PTSD, acute like stress disorder, how I work through that. Like I use narrative therapy. I know some folks are like EMDR. I am Caribbean. I don't know about EMDR for my clients because I don't know if it's going to work for them. And I think about like my ancestral upbringing and how things work, and will EMDR work or clash? Not sure. So for those who use that practice, it may work for them. But for me as a traumatologist, the way I look at it, I use narrative therapy. When you have experienced complex trauma, you you lose your voice in that essence. And when you lose your voice, you need to learn how to tell your story. So I always lean back into narrative therapy because you need to tell your story and figure out, how am I going to move forward with this? And why does my story matter so much? And when we think about maternal mental health, your story matters. And as a woman who has used like IVF before and having to go through that experience myself, I had to humble my little self real quick to realize what that experience was and how to collectively help other people to navigate like their spaces and how they feel. All of those things matter. We are human. We go through things. We do not get to say, I'm the clinician, I'm not going through it. Yes, you will. You go through something. So whatever it is, you take that with you you carry it and it makes you stronger and you show up for the people. And that's just been how I chose my niche area to really say, I pay this forward because I know what this feels like. And I'm here to help you get through it because you're going to be stronger and you're going to get past this. So.
And I really appreciate that, Dr. McCants, because oftentimes within the mental health space, we'll hear a lot of these buzzwords or these buzz therapeutic modalities, and we'll think that it's very blanketed, one size fits all approach. But when you're working with clients, that we know that they come with their own lived experiences that are influenced by their culture, and being able to discern between to the student in the room is that being able to recognize that not all modalities are applicable to each and every one of our clients, and really lean into the multicultural perspective so that we're very inclusive with the modalities, the interventions, the strategies that we're working with, conducive to the client's background, and whether or not is it going to land the way that we intended to land, or is it going to be a complete miss? And to your point, and you shared this earlier, is that this may be their only opportunity where they're seeking a mental health professional. And this is the make or break for some of our clients, and being able to make sure that we're that space for them to land and to stay. So, you know, I'm just peaked at the time and can't even believe that 59 minutes has elapsed so quickly, but I am so appreciative of my esteemed panelists who have taken the time to not only meet with us, but definitely to share their own personal and professional experiences into their journey and within the realm of behavioral health, and more importantly, their advocacy within this space and holding and moving forward in the needle within the behavioral health field. So I thank you all humbly to have taken the time to meet with us. And I'm very much appreciative of those who've attended this panel discussion, that you are walking away with some tips, some tricks, and some gems, and definitely some fire up under us to really lean into heavily your advocacy within this space as well, and pursuing professional roles, because we are the change agents, and that's not just within the lives of our clients, but within the literal field. So I thank you all for joining us, and thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons, everyone. Thank you.